And let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Bear with me for a moment. Okay, and Maddie, if you can just confirm for me that you are seeing just the WHS World Handicap System with the cool golf course picture.
Good to go.
Okay, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We'll get this road on the show, if you will. Welcome to the World Handicap System Revision 2024. Right, my name is Aaron Gareca, and I'm the Managing Director of Club and Facility Services. There's usually two other staff members online with us, but the other one is currently on the phone. We do have another one here, so we'll kind of just get started, and we'll go into introductions here in a second. But this is what today's agenda is going to look like. We have intros. Section 1 is pretty quick, and then section 2 and 3 is what you all came here to see today. That has everything from net double bogey to ESRs to hard cap, soft cap, to a couple new things in here that you'll see today, and how 9-hole scores are going to be recorded moving forward, and what is now known as the expected score differential. Then we're going to round out with a little Q&A. Hopefully there won't be too many, because I do have plenty of slides throughout the presentation just for questions. And so we'll kind of take some time here to answer after each big section. And then I do have some certification quiz details for you all. And then again, that's when the recording will end. And I do have a little bit of a bonus for you for joining us today. Okay, so let's get started with the intros. Okay, so again, my name is Aaron Gareca, and I am the Managing Director of Club and Facility Services. What does that mean exactly? That means that I do everything from course rating to handicapping to little golf junior support, although I don't do as much as I used to at all, which is awesome. It takes a lot off my plate, which is great. Colorado native, been playing golf since I was 5 years old. Let's see, I started as an intern here in as an intern with the Colorado Women's Golf Association in 2017. And they liked me so much, they kept me on. And now here I am talking to you guys. So that's kind of been my journey. And then, as I mentioned before, our third staff member on today, who I'm sure most of you have talked to, just joined us. So we'll get to Maddie next, and then Kim last. Maddie, if you can please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie Kern. As you saw before, I am the manager of Club and Facility Services. So I am pretty much, like I would like to tell people, Aaron 2.0. So whatever you need, I am there for you. A little bit about me. I'm also a Colorado native. I'm a 4th gen. So that is pretty exciting. I grew up on Highland Hills Golf Course, so that place has a small little part in my heart forever. I played collegiately at Regis University all 4 years. Decided I want to pursue a career in the golf industry, so I interned at the CGA my senior year of college. Decided still want to see different avenues of different things. So I was an associate golf professional at Columbine Country Club for a few years. Moved over to Golf Tech, was a professional coach through them for a little while. And then now I am back at the CGA doing everything club and facility services. So yeah.
Yeah, we just we took her out on the golf course to see what a little course rating is like, and let's just say her world was turned upside down because she's never seen a course in that lens before. So that's going to be fun for her and I. And then I believe we do have Kim on the line. Kim, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and introducing yourself for us.
Hi there. Sorry about that. I'm having computer issues, so if I lose you, I'll jump back on. I'm Kim Bussey. I'm the manager of admin services. I've been with the CGA for just had my 5th anniversary. So lots of phone calls, lots of emails. I also help on the junior side. I assist golf course with other needs that they might have. So yeah, still learning the game of golf, but it's I play for fun, not for scores.
Perfect. Perfect. The longer I'm in the game, the more I play for fun and not for scores either. But thank you again for being here today. We do have about 2 hours and 15 minutes worth of content minus questions. The goal is to get you guys out of here early if we can. If not, we do have 3 hours slotted for this session. But the last session only took 2.5 hours with questions. So I'm fairly confident we can get you out with giving you 30 minutes back for to your day today. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you do have a question, please, if you would either send it in the chat or wait until those questions slides, that would be great. This way, you know, the momentum doesn't get interrupted while we're going, because again, this is a lot of material. It is catered towards committee chairs, but also towards some of the, you know, just normal golfers. So those of you on the committee, great. This is going to be just for you. Those of you who are not on committee, who are just interested in the information, this will also be for you as well. And there will be some numbers. So I hope you all like numbers, because you're going to see plenty. Okay. First and foremost, let's just hop right into it, shall we? Changes for 2024. All right, there are 5 big changes this year, okay? We're going to talk about them throughout the presentation, as you can expect. But the one thing I want to alert you to is this bad boy right here. And this may or may not signify that you may need to know what these are. You'll see these on particular slides going through the presentation. So all I got to say is wink, wink, okay? I'll point it out to you as we go along. I may or may not say wink, wink, but we'll see. Anyway, so there's 5 principal changes this year with the WHS. And first one is score used when hole or holes not played. We'll get into more detail later. What most of you are here to see today, treatment of 9-hole scores. How are those treated now? 9-hole scores will no longer wait to be combined. They will immediately be able to be, or to affect the handicap index as soon as they're posted, which is awesome. We'll see how that works. The guidance of use of handicap allowances. There's a couple of minor changes there. Just want to alert you to what those are. A big one. I know a couple people on this call may be using what is called Cap Patrol. The USGA actually is now seeing what Cap Patrol does for clubs, and actually try to create their own version of Cap Patrol in terms of having a good handicap review tool for peer review in order to suggest recommended modifications to handicaps for members. So we'll kind of go through what that is. Unfortunately, that won't be out until April. I have seen what it looks like just kind of on the surface, but I have not seen exactly how it works. So I'll show you kind of a high level view of what that's going to do. And then unfortunately, I won't have any kind of what it looks like as of now, but hopefully in the future, I'll have something for you all. And then finally, the last big change for this year is formerly prior to 2024, a golf course had to be at minimum 1,500 yards for 9 holes or 3,000 yards for 18 holes to get a course rating. Now, with a bunch of math and mathematicians getting their heads together and changing some weightings and things like that, the new minimum length for a golf course is now 750 yards for 9 holes. And yes, those handicaps will travel. So we'll go into those a little bit deeper as we move along here. But let's start with section 1. Section 1 is kind of overview for a lot of you who've joined me on these calls before. What is the purpose of the WHS and authorization and obtaining a handicap index? Well, in layman's terms, the purpose of the WHS is to enhance the enjoyment of the game of golf. You know, kind of the overarching theme of the WHS is to be as inclusive as possible, to allow golfers of any age, any skill, or any ability, the ability to track and maintain a handicap index and play golf with whomever, wherever, on a fair and equitable basis. Oh man, whew, flew through that one. That was a good one. Again, very easy. Purpose is to, spread the game of golf through every and all avenue that we can in order to get more golfers playing the game of golf that we love so much. Okay, section 2 now. All right, now we're going to start getting into the weeds a little bit, slowly but surely. If you think of it, it's kind of like a meal, right? Have a little appetizer to wet your whistle. Then we have the main course here in sections 2 and 3, and then section 4 will be kind of the dessert, okay? So, all right, let's get after it. Score is acceptable for handicap purposes. Rule 2 covers the conditions a score must satisfy for it to be acceptable for handicap purposes, providing confidence that it will produce reasonable evidence of the player's ability and ultimately handicap index. Because remember, a handicap index is a representation of a player's ability to play, not how they're playing now, but over a period of time, which is why the system uses the lowest 8 score differentials out of the previous 20 scores and doesn't use the most recent 8 scores. So there's that. Okay, let's take a look. Score is acceptable for handicap purposes if the round has been played in an authorized format of play, was played on a golf course with the current slope and rating. And just an FYI there, ratings are good for 10 years, but here in Colorado, we actually have our golf courses on an 8-year rotation to allow for maintenance of the course, construction, or what just happened in 2020 COVID. This way, we don't have to take them out of schedule. Okay. Then here's a big change kind of in 2018 is when it was. And a score is acceptable when in the company of at least one additional person. A note on that one is that person does not need to be playing. So they can just be accompanying you and be able to provide assurance that that golfer did what they were supposed to do, and they're not lying on their score. And here's a big one that we get questions on all the time, especially when there's a super nice day in December like we had last week. Why can't I post my score right now? Well, it's not during the active season, which here in Colorado is between March 15th and November 15th. And the reason why we have an active and inactive season is when we rate a golf course, we rate it when the grass is green and the foliage is leaved out on everything. Right now, as you can see, most of the grass is yellow. It's still kind of freezing temperatures in the morning, which means the ground is rock hard, so you could get more length off your tee shots, things like that. So the courses are not in the same condition as they were when they were rated, which is why we have an active and inactive season. Okay, and last but not least, a score is acceptable for handicap purposes if played by the rules of golf. Super easy, nothing crazy there. All right, what are some acceptable scores, you may ask? Well, no big change here. These are all similar to what you've seen in the past. While being coached on a golf course, that is definitely not acceptable when using non-conforming equipment. When the number or type of clubs used for your event has been restricted, such as a 3-club event. So, the conditions of competition say that, oh, you can only use 3 clubs and it's up to your choice. Unfortunately, that is not an acceptable round for score posting. When a score cannot be verified by one other person, that score is not acceptable. Not playing the required number of holes. We'll go into this a little bit more here in a bit, but now 9 holes have to be played to at least post a score. Prior to this year, it used to be 7. At least 7 holes must be played to post a score, but now it is 9 holes, okay? And then when a player does not play their own ball, for example, scrambles, that's always the go-to answer. A scramble score is not postable. Okay, now here's one that I like to bring. What happens when a player gets disqualified? Well, And then I guess there's a difference between breach and major breach. So if a player gets DQ'd for a major breach, that score is not postable for handicap purposes. But if a player gets disqualified for not signing a scorecard, would that be considered a postable score? The answer to that question is yes. Because they played the entire round, the only thing they didn't do is sign the card, which yes, it is a DQ offense, but the score is still postable for handicap purposes. Okay. All right. And there's a couple others there too. But again, kind of the ultimate thing here is the final determination is at the discretion of the committee and based on the circumstances and what the intentions were of the player. Okay. And here's a small clarification to last year. Oops. I don't know how I got that yellow line on there. Okay. So when a hold is not played by the rules of golf in general play, where a player has breached the rules of golf, knowingly failed to apply the correct penalty, the score should generally not be accepted for handicap purposes. However, depending on the circumstances, kind of as I mentioned before, the committee has a discretion to produce an acceptable score, and these two are the options last year: recording the actual score for the hole or adjusting the whole score using net bogey. But one of the few places now where you can use net par would be in a situation like this, right? This was a change from last year to this year, being able to use net par for a hole not played by the rules of golf to still post the score. Yeah, again, few, because now net par is no longer what is recommended to be used. Okay, Kenneth, as I mentioned briefly before, the minimum number of holes played in order to post a score, now you need to at least play 9 on a rated 9-hole loop. So if you played holes 2 through 10 on a golf course, unfortunately, holes 3 through 10 do not have a rating. Holes 1 through 9 do, so then that score would not be postable. All right, for an 18-hole score to be acceptable, you must at least have played 10 holes, right? Or at least started 10 holes. Okay, and then when 10 to 17 holes are played, the player must post their score using the hole-by-hole option. Okay, in gin products, as soon as player enters a 17-hole score or something, or tries to enter a total score for 17 holes, the system will kind of give them a warning saying, hey, you know, you didn't complete your round. You need to post your scores hole by hole. So that's currently being produced. There's a couple bugs at the moment with that, as you can expect with any new changes, you know, any new change to a software, but it actually works pretty well. Okay, adjustment to hole scores. Okay, so a score for handicap purposes should not overly influence or should not be overly influenced by 1 or 2 holes, right? We all have 1, 2 bad holes, and we don't want that to influence our handicap if we can avoid it. So Rule 3 covers circumstances where scores may be acceptable and how these hole scores should be adjusted. Okay. All right, here's one of my favorite topics. The maximum hole score for handicap purposes. I think everybody knows what this is called. It is called net double bogey, right? But before we get into all of that good stuff, say for instance, we have a player who is brand new to the game of golf. Great, come on in, play some golf. For individuals who are brand new, who have never had a handicap index before, their maximum hole score is actually par plus 5 on any one hole. So whatever the par is, plus 5 strokes, even if they have 12, 13, 14 on one, the maximum score for handicap purposes is par plus 5 strokes. All right, here we go. Net double bogey. The word in itself, I think, is very confusing. And so what I like to call this is double bogey plus. The maximum hole score for any one hole is double bogey plus the amount of pops that individual has as determined by the course handicap. Okay, so all you do is you take double bogey plus those pops, to get your maximum allowable score for handicap purposes. All right, that's just a lot of words. Let's see how this works in action. Okay, here we go. We are playing the 2024 WHS Invitational, and today we just so happen to be at Virtual Country Club. A very nice place, very tough, especially the par fives. Let's go through this example here. This was an 18-hole card, but we're only using 9 for this example. Okay, and we have Kate Mate. For those of you who know the CGA staff, Kate Mate is she's on our tournament team and she leads that team as well. And she is a very good golfer. So this could potentially be one of her scorecards that she would post. She is also very consistent, as you can see in real life and for today's example. Bunch of 4s going on here, except for the 2 yellow boxes. Okay. So on the third hole, which just so happens to be a par 5, that is 555 yards. Par 5, 5, 5, 5. Lots of 5s going on there. She got a 9, front row. Okay. So she's like, all right, let me go ahead and get it back together. She's had a bad hole. That's okay. Again, she gets back to old consistent Kate Mate. And then here's another par 5, 527. Long carries, trees left, trees right, just trouble everywhere. Well, looks like she also shot a 9 on that hole as well. Okay, and then she finishes out the 9 holes with 4 and 4. Okay, so I'll do all the math for you. All of that added up equals a 46. And what is that good for? That would be the score used for the event, right? Now we must adjust, or we must see if any of these holes need to be adjusted in order to get the score used for handicap purposes. So there's almost 2 scores here, one used for the event and one used for handicap purposes and posted to Jen, okay? Okay, so we have hole number 1 here, par 4, she got a 4. Does that need to be adjusted? Nope. Okay, hole 2, par 3, and she got a 4. Does that at least get to our double bogey minimum? Nope. Does that need to be adjusted? Nope, not at all. Now this par 5, we have a 9 with 1 dot. Do you think that needs to be adjusted? Yes. So let's take a look. So if we have a par 5, double bogey just off the bat on a par 5 would be a 7 plus pops, double bogey plus, right? So if we have a 7 and we have 1 pop here, her maximum hole score on this one hole in particular is not a 9, but 8. Okay. Now let's keep it going. So par 4, 2 par 4s in a row, and she got a par 4. She parred each. No need to adjust those scores. Another par 3. She also shot a 4 on that hole. She got a bogey. Doesn't reach our double bogey threshold. No need to adjust. Up here's this other pesky par 5 here. She got a 9 on this one as well with 1 pop. So again, double bogey plus, double bogey on a par 5 is a 7 plus 1 dot would be an 8. So instead of a 9, her maximum hole score on this hole in particular would be an 8 as well. And then we finish off the 9 with 2 par 4s where she parred those. So as I mentioned, 46 would be the score used for the event, but the score used for handicap purposes would instead be a 44. Okay, that's double bogey or net double bogey, or what I tell people to refer to it as double bogey plus. Okay, now when a hole is not played, one of the things before I move forward that I mentioned before is guy here, wink wink. A score from an incomplete round or when 1 or more holes have not been played may only be used for handicap purposes if, among other things, at least 9 holes have been played, or an 18-hole score where at least 10 through 17 holes have been played. And the reason for not completing the round was valid. Okay. So here are some valid reasons. 1, darkness, bad weather. We've all been there. That is definitely a valid reason. Injury or illness. That is definitely a valid reason for not completing a round. A hole or holes have been declared out of play by the committee for maintenance purposes. You know, we all know those golf courses who shut down a hole, you know, a hole at a time when they're doing a big, you know, a sprinkler renovation, things like that. That is still, that is a good reason for not playing a hole. And a match finishing before the final hole on the course. That is a valid reason for not finishing as well. Okay, can you? Yes. Do you have to? No. All right, here are some invalid reasons, okay? Whether that does not prevent the continuation of play. The funny thing is when weather gets really bad and people play, most of the time they don't post their scores. That's just the way things go, probably because they aren't playing up to their potential. Should they post them? Yes. Do they? Depends on the person. Okay, another invalid reason, not playing to a particular hole to avoid a high hole score. That is a one that we see frequently. Not playing the final holes on a golf course in order to avoid submitting a high score as well. If playing badly, or vice versa, a low score if playing really well. That is an invalid reason for not posting. Or any other situations considered unreasonable by the committee. Okay. So where the handicap committee determines that one or more holes has not been played for a valid reason, an 18-hole score differential will be created using the new expected score for the hole or holes not played. All right. Again, wink, wink. All right, when 10 through 17 holes have been played, you can definitely post a score. Again, those scores have to be posted hole by hole. So what happens is, for all holes played, a score differential is created for holes played. And then for holes not played, an inspected score is used for those holes. And then those values are then added up to create an 18-hole differential, again, which can immediately affect the handicap index. And kind of as I mentioned, it will require the players to post hole by hole. And in limited circumstances, kind of as I mentioned before, and as I'll continue to mention throughout this presentation, net par can only be used in limited circumstances versus what we used to do, you know, the previous 4 years, okay? And so it is always good to know what the expected score is in that definition. And so here's the definition, okay? Score a player is expected to achieve over a specified number of holes on a course of standard difficulty, and it is calculated using the player's handicap index and attributes a numerical value against any hole or holes not played during the round. So the expected score can be thought of as the PCC. We don't quite know what the math is, as that's proprietary information that only the USGA knows. But just know that what it does use is it's based off of the score differential of a player with the given handicap index and a normal distribution of scores. So it uses the average of players with that specific handicap index, and it is not specific to any one player. We'll kind of go into depth of how it works here in a bit, especially for 9-hole scores. But here's just a brief example of when at least 16 holes are played. Okay. All right, so we have our player, Jane Smith, playing Sunnyside Golf Club. She has a 16.0 handicap index. The front 9 rating is 36.0. Back 9 rating is 36.4, and that equates to a course handicap of 18 with a front 9 slope of 125 and a back 9 slope of 126. Okay, so here we can see her hole scores, right? So she shot a 42 on the front 9. She started on 1, so that's an acceptable score there. And then she played up to hole 16 and doesn't quite finish 17 and 18. due to whatever reason, right? So here's what's going to happen first. All right. First thing the system is going to do is it's going to calculate a course rating for the holes played, and in this case, 16 holes, which will include the 9-hole rating and slope, right, which we get here, right? And then the system creates a rating for the 7 holes played, which in this case, which happens to be 27.9. Again, that math is not known, unfortunately, but it then adds those two together to create a 16-hole rating of 63.9, right? And they also determine the slope as being 125. So now we have essentially a 16-hole rating of 63.9 and a 16-hole slope of 125. All of that information is what is needed in order to post a score, right? Or in order to get at a score differential, if you will. So let's do it. So then those numbers are used in the score differential calculation for the 16 holes played, right? So here's your differential calculation. 113, for those of you who've joined me on this before, also known as standard slope, divided by a slope of the tees played, and in this case of the 16-hole tees played. You take that sum and you multiply it by the adjusted gross score for that 16 holes, or for those 16 holes that were played, which just so happens to equate to 78, minus the course rating of the holes played, which we got as 63.9, right? Okay, and then all of that would equate to a 16-hole score differential of 12.7. So we have our first differential of holes played, right? So now what we do is then the system kicks in and uses individuals with, an average of individuals who have a handicap index of 16.0 and determines that her expected score for the 2 holes not played, or her expected score differential for the 2 holes not played, would come to 2.12. So then that is added to the 16-hole score differential, giving us an 18-hole score differential of 14.8, which would then be eligible to affect the handicap index. And again, I want you to remember, the expected score is based on the average score differential of a player with a given handicap index, in this case 16.0, and a normal distribution of scores, and it is not specific to each individual player. Consistency is key with that, okay? So again, I can't unfortunately show you the exact math of how it works, but I can tell you kind of how it does its thing, right? So the course rating is based on information known about the holes played, right? The number of holes played, the length of the holes played, which we input into the course rating database when we rate a golf course rating information, and par. The slope rating for the holes played is calculated using the weighted average of the slope rating of the full 9 that was played, and the slope rating and the number of holes played on the 9 that was not completed. Okay, so in Jane Smith's example, the front 9 slope rating was 125, right? And the back 9 slope rating was 126. This produced a slope rating of 125.4375, which was then rounded to a whole number of 125 for display purposes. Okay. Nope. Looks like we have one person come back in. Okay. So scoring record. Here's what it's going to look like in the GIN system when this happens, okay? So when between 10 and 17 holes are played, the scoring record will display the following, right? So you'll see here, in this case, it was an away score, but it'll show the actual adjusted gross score and how many holes it took to achieve this score. So it's not going to show you an 18-hole score. It'll show you however, whatever the math is for the holes completed. So again, it was 78 through 16 here in brackets, right? And this is to help, aid with the potential confusion of seeing that score, right? And it's also going to show you 18-hole course rating and slope. And the last thing it's going to show you is the 18-hole score differential, right? Which was determined using the expected score differential math. And then again, like I said, it's going to be directly in this individual's revision scores, and this one just so happens to be affecting their handicap index because it's low enough. Okay. The benefits of this, well, it's consistent. Players will see more consistency than if they were to apply net par for remaining unplayed holes. This is because the expected score is not course specific or reliant upon stroke index allocation like net par is. This is flexible, right? So for the first time, if between 10 to 13 holes are played, the player will have an 18-hole score differential in their scoring record versus not being able to count them whatsoever. And then this is modern. One of the big things that the USGA is trying to do is leverage technology nowadays. So they're constantly updating their GIN app, their online GIN portal as well. And so what they're doing is by leveraging score posting technology to make this process simple and intuitive, the result will be a more modern experience for players, which is why the recommendation will continue to be, please have your members post hole by hole, because not only is that hole by hole score data collected for future reference maybe, but it also helps with, or would also be necessary when 10 through 17 holes are played for the expected score differential to be calculated. Okay. All right. So when a hole is not completed, all right, this one didn't change, which is great. This is nice. There are various circumstances that might result in a player not playing a hole, or not completing a hole, should I say. The result has been decided, especially in a partner match. A hole has been conceded in match play, or a partner already has a better score, right? So USGA did provide guidance with this one, which we'll get to here in a second. But for those of you who are new, the most likely score is super easy. The number of strokes already taken, plus the number of strokes the player would most likely require to complete the hole, plus any penalty strokes that would have been incurred, okay? Now, the USGA has a little gray area, and this is where one of those situations appears, right? So here's the most likely score guidelines. So whenever the golf ball lies within 5 feet of the hole, you just add one additional stroke to the total stroke so far, right? So I don't know about you, but I would love to be 100% from 5 feet. Just saying. My scores, my handicap index might go down a little bit if I was 100% from 5 feet, but that's neither here nor there. Okay. Now, if the golf ball lies between 5 feet and 20 yards from the hole, here's that gray area I was telling you about. You then add 2 or 3 additional strokes to the total, depending on the position of the ball, the difficulty of the green, and the ability of the player. Okay. Now, if the ball lies more than 20 yards from the hole, there's a gray area again. You then add 3 or 4 additional strokes to the total, depending again on the position of the ball, the difficulty of the green, and the ability of the player. Okay. I know that was a lot of questions. Maddie, what do you got? I know there's a couple in there. We'll get to the written questions first, and then if you do have another question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask it. And I believe we have a couple. So Maddie, what are yours first?
Sure. So rule 3.2, expected score should help with posting match play scores.
Yes, as long as, again, the players played at least 10 holes.
Perfect. And then Golf Genius 1 here. My assumption is that Golf Genius/GIN will always automatically compute the right differentials when scores are posted hole by hole if a hole score is left blank.
Yes, to my knowledge so far, that is correct. I've gotten this question before on the first one. So there will be a way that you have to post scores moving forward in Golf Genius for this to happen. And I'm going to assume if you leave it blank, then the expected score will take over when posting scores to GIN. But then there's going to be some guidance on to, what if a player is DQ'd after 16 holes, or, there's going to be some guidance on the proper, should it be a WD versus a NC versus a DQ? There's going to be some guidance on that in terms of recording an expected score and posting to Jen. Good question, though. All right, anybody else? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I see a lot of confused eyes, or maybe just a lot of thought processing going on. Yes, go ahead.
I get a little the net double bogey and net par. You mentioned that net par is used rarely. Can you talk a little bit about the difference and when each is applied?
Yeah, so net double bogey is the maximum hole score, right? So in order to post a hole score, a score must be, or a hole must be started, right? And if it's not completed, then you would use what we just talked about here. And so net par is what is used whenever, or what used to be used whenever a hole was not played. Then what you could do is, using the course handicaps and the amount of pots that they were to have received on holes not played, you would then add par plus those pots to get you a net par score for any holes not played. That is no longer the recommendation, and unless in certain circumstances, such as a hole being out of play, that is going to be the biggest one where net par can still be used. But the expected score will be what will be used moving forward instead of net par. So net double bogey is the maximum hole score whenever a hole is started and not played, and expected score will take over for everything else, and then net par will be what is used in certain circumstances, most likely, or the most current one being the, whenever a hole is under construction. Does that answer your question? Perfect. Thanks, Deb. Okay, let's see.
Hey, Aaron, this is Melissa Ward. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, Melissa. How are you?
I'm great. Hey, so my question is, basically, if we post hole by hole through Gin, this is all going to happen automatically, or Golf Genius hole by hole. But basically, we really need to be able to explain to our players, why does my score look so funny? Because they're used to seeing an 18-hole score that's been calculated for them if they don't finish. And now it's going to show how many holes they actually played. But knowing that an 18-hole score was calculated off of that to post. Is that correct? Is that the best way to explain it?
Correct. So essentially, the best way to explain it is there'll be two different score differentials, if you will. A differential for holes played versus holes not played, added together to create a total differential. Okay, let's see. And then looks like Leanne, what were the 3 bullets for rule 3.3? I'm assuming you're talking about this one. Number of strokes already taken, plus the number of strokes the player would most likely get based on the recommendations and ball position, plus any penalty strokes incurred on that hole. And I hope that is what you were referring to. Okay. Moving forward here. And if you didn't get all those, let me know. We can come back to it later. Okay. And then looks like Kathy, when will the players see the 18-hole score for the round when holes are not played? Immediately. So again, what will happen is, such as in Jane Smith's example, she played 16 holes. She will see this as soon as the score is posted. She will see the score for holes played, the number of holes that it took to reach this score, and she will see the 18-hole differential. And the math is what's going to happen on the back end in order to get this, but she will see this the next day after the revision happens at midnight that night. Good question. Okay, any more questions on that? I know that was a lot. Unfortunately, this next one may or may not be a lot as well. So bear with me. I'll try to throw some jokes in there to make things a little lighter. But we're going to keep this train moving. Okay, looks like we have one more. So the expected score differential only works with hole-by-hole scoring, meaning for non-tournament golf, the members have to hole-by-hole score. No. So depending on how many holes played. So remember, you can still post an 18-hole total score, right? You can still post a 9-hole total score. But whenever a complete round has not been finished, and again, you know, at least 9-hole scores must be played. But whenever you don't finish at least 18 holes, then that's when hole-by-hole scores must be posted. Otherwise, there won't be, the system will not be able to calculate a course rating or a slope for the holes played, and will also not be able to create an expected differential for holes not played because it doesn't know which. So they have to be posted hole by hole. Hope that helps there, Justin. Expected scores will be subject to PCC, correct. Well, actually, the total score there, Jeff, will be subject to PCC. Expected scoring in itself will not be subject to PCC, as it's just an average of players with that handicap index on a course of average difficulty. But that total score differential, once combined, will be eligible for PCC modification. Okay, can a player pick up their ball and they exceed double bogey plus and have it count? Yes. If it's just for normal play. Tournament play though, that's a different story. Normal play, as soon as an individual reaches their double bogey plus maximum, they could technically pick the ball up there and keep moving forward. That is actually one of the recommendations by the USGA for just regular golf days, not for tournament plays, not for play days, things like that. For you're just going out on a random Tuesday and you play golf and you're having a bad hole, as soon as you reach a double bogey max, you can't pick it up. And that score would still be postable. Okay, for weather, who determines if the weather is a valid reason, like lightning, when some people keep playing and others say, Leanne, that would be at the discretion of the individual, unfortunately, because some courses have, you know, built-in technology that assists players, but again, that comes with, you know, insurance, things like that. A lot of courses leave it up to the player to determine those situations, and you know, a lot of times we still see people out there playing in lightning conditions, unfortunately. So that would kind of be at the discretion of the individual. For tournament purposes, that'll make it real easy. So I hope that answers, but that's kind of my best answer for that question. But okay, that was good. If you have any additional questions, we'll leave it for the next question slide, and we'll just keep this show moving. Okay. Submitting a score. All right, here we go. Rule 4 covers the process for the submission of acceptable scores for handicap purposes, both to obtain an initial handicap index as well as to maintain an established handicap index. Okay, eligibility to submit a score, right? The score must be posted by the player. Score could be posted by the handicap committee, or it can be posted by the committee in charge of competition, or by anyone else authorized by the player. In this case, the easiest example would be a junior golfer who does not have access to GIN yet because they do not meet the age requirement. So, easy there. All right, time frame for posting a score. I know I keep harping on this every year for those of you who come to this, but the recommendation is to always try to post your score as soon as you can after the round has been completed, in order for that score to not only be revised for the next day, but to also be included in PCC calculation if there would be any PCC adjustment for that night. You know, say there were 7 scores entered, and again, we'll kind of go over some of those qualifications here in a second, but PCC needs at least 8 scores, and if that person who didn't post was the 8th score, unfortunately, nobody would get the benefit of the PCC who played that day. Okay. And you can kind of see what's going on here with these two bullets. And again, I apologize for this yellow line. I don't know what's going on there. I'll try to get that fixed here up at the break. Okay, so certification of a score, Rule 4.4. A score posted for handicap purposes must be made available for peer review as soon as possible after the completion of the round. To facilitate this process of peer review, a player or someone authorized by them must post their score, again, as soon as possible. There's a theme here, I think, as soon as possible, ASAP. The handicap committee should ensure the score is posted to the player scoring record as soon as possible as well. And peer review is normally conducted by somebody. Again, it's kind of in the name, peer review. Playing in the same group or who was present during the round, that's usually where it happens. Hey, I thought you had a 5 there. Actually, no, I had a 4, so on and so forth. And who is a member of the same golf club as a player? I usually get this all the time, people doing some checks and balances. With updates to the technology, this has become an easier thing to do for members of the same club. So that's nice. Okay. Number of scores for initial handicap index. Good news here, this did not change. So in order to obtain an initial handicap index, at least 54 holes made up of both or either 9 or 18 hole scores would create that initial handicap index. All right, and so interesting thing here, the expected score would not be used for a 9-hole score posted here until 54 holes have been played. Then the system will actually retroactively fill in those 9-hole scores posted with expected scores and then create a new handicap index, which is pretty cool. Any questions about that? That was a quick one, but I like to throw question slide in right here just for anything else. All right, perfect. Well then, here's my question to you. Does anybody need a 10-minute break? I know we're not quite at the hour yet, but we're almost about halfway through. Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead. We'll keep going here. This is a big section as well, and then we'll take a break after this section, 10 minutes, and then we'll reconvene to finish up. Okay? Good. All right, section 3. Handicap index calculation. For all you math nerds out there, this section is for you because I will actually have some numbers for you on this one. Okay. All right, so Rule 5 covers the process of calculating a handicap index. Easy, simple, and it also incorporates safeguards, which hopefully you all know about. If not, you will learn today. Needed to help ensure that a player's handicap index remains reflective of their ability and that equity is retained for all golfers. All right, in order to calculate a handicap index, we must know how to calculate a score differential. We kind of saw this before when we talked about expected score, but here's the math, or here's the equation. The score differential equates to the sum of 113, which again is known as standard slope, divided by slope rating of the tees being played. Then you take that sum and you multiply it by the adjusted gross score, or the score adjusted using double bogey plus, minus the course rating of the tees played, minus any PCC adjustment if there is any. And then a note here, just know that the PCC ranges from -1 to +3. Course -1 means that the course played easier, +1, +2, +3 means that the course played harder. Okay. So here's an example. We have an adjusted gross score of 85. We have a course rating 68.7, slope rating of 117, and unfortunately for this individual, no PCC adjustment was applied. Most of the time, this is the case. But then we throw those numbers in here: 113, also known as what? Standard slope, and then you multiply that sum by the sum of 85, the adjusted gross score, minus 68.7 minus 0. I'll do the math for you. That equates to a 15.7 score differential, which would then be posted to that individual score history and would now be eligible to affect their handicap index. All right. Now, when a player posts a 9-hole score, a 9-hole score differential will be calculated for the 9 holes played, and that number will combine with the expected score differential based on the player's handicap index to create an 18-hole score differential. Again, this section right here is has been seen before when we talked about when 10 through 17 holes are played. And again, notice this bad boy here. Just saying, it might be good to remember this. And just know what the expected score is. And remember, the expected score is based on the average score differential of a player with a given handicap index and a normal distribution of scores, and it is not specific to each player. It's an average. Okay, so now we're going to get into some good examples here. Okay, so now we have John Smith playing Sunnyside Golf Club. He has a handicap index of 10.0. He is deciding to play the bronze tees that has a front 9 rating of 36.0125. Okay, so he plays his round, shoots a 42. Okay, so then that 9-hole score differential is calculated. You take that score differential equation, 113 divided by slope of the 9 holes, and then you take the sum of this, so 42 minus 36 minus 0. And that equates to a score differential of 5.42. Now what happens? The magic happens. Okay, so you take that 5.42 and an expected differential, or an expected 9-hole score differential, if you will, is created using everybody who, the average of individuals with a 10.0 handicap index on an average course of standard difficulty. And that would equate to 6.38, right? So those two are then added together to create an 18-hole score differential of 11.8, which again would now be eligible to directly affect a handicap index. Okay. Notice the banner. All right. So that's a good example. But here's better examples of what it looks like for multiple people with multiple handicap indexes. All right. Okay. So here's example 2. So we play the front 9 silver tees, course rating of 36, slope rating of 125. We have an AGS, or an adjusted gross score, of 42 that produces a differential of 5.2. Again, we just did the math. So that's that there. But player A in this case has a 4.0 handicap index. Player B has a handicap index of 10.0, and player C has a handicap index of 16.0. But again, they all shot 42 for the front 9, which gave us a 5.42 differential based on the rating and slope of the tees played, right? So they all have a front 9 differential of 5.42. The only difference is they all have different handicap indexes, right? So now you'll see that when 5.2 added to the expected score differential of a player with 4.0 handicap index would equate to only a score differential, or an 18-hole score differential of 8.7. And as you would expect, the higher the handicap index, the higher the expected score differential, the higher the total 18-hole score differential will be. So this player, 18-hole score differential for a 10 handicap index player would be an 11.8. And for player C, who has a 16.0 handicap index, their 18-hole score differential would be 14.9. Does that make sense? Again, the expected score differential uses the average of individuals with that same handicap index. And it is not specific to one player. I like that example a lot. But now let's look at this other example. This is a good one as well. Okay, so what happens when players with the same handicap index, or let's use players with the same handicap index. They all play the front 9 blue tees, course rating of 35.1, slope rating of 118, right? Front nine score, 47, 47, 47 for all three. And again, they all have the same 17.1 handicap index. But here, actually, player C here actually scores at 49 on the front nine. So notice here, the first two players, players A and B, have a 9-hole score differential of 11.4. Again, using the score plus the rating and slope information. That's how we get that. And then this player, player C, shot a 49. And then when using the equation that we saw earlier, actually gives us a 13.3 score differential for the holes played. Now the expected score kicks in, right? And again, it uses the average of players with the same handicap index, which is why these two players will get the same 18-hole score differential, because their front nine score differentials were the same, right? And they have the same handicap index. If they had different handicap indexes, these two numbers would be different, like we saw in the last example. Right, now player C down here, yes, they have the same handicap index, so that expected score differential will be the same as these three. But the difference here being their front 9-hole score differential is 13.3. So when added to the expected score here, that's why they have an 18-hole score differential of 23.4. Okay, all due to this. Okay, and again, when 9 holes are played, this is exactly what the players are going to see in GIN. They're going to see the 9-hole adjusted gross score. That score is also going to be annotated with an N in the score type column. Right here, you can see. I hope you guys can see that. And then you're going to see the 9-hole course rating and slope rating. But the difference is you're going to see the 18-hole score differential. I know that's going to take a little while to get used to. Again, it's going to be the 9-hole score, 9-hole course rating, 9-hole slope rating, but you're going to see the 18-hole score differential. All right. All right. And then kind of as I mentioned before, the use of expected score will begin as soon as the player establishes that initial handicap index, which happens after 54 holes. And the 9-hole benefits, okay? Again, it's consistent. It produces a consistent score differential based on the handicap index and avoids volatility seen with previous treatment of 9-hole scores. You know, before this year, 9-hole scores could potentially live in somebody's score history for a year before they're not eligible to be used. Now, 9-hole scores will be eligible to affect the handicap index immediately, which is nice. It provides responsive handicap index revisions and allows players to reach a full scoring record of 20 scores more quickly, especially for those individuals who only play 9 holes starting out. Equitable. The new method provides a better indication of what the player would have scored on the second 9 versus using net par, and should result in a more equitable handicap index. And inclusive, it's welcoming to players who typically play 9 holes of golf on any given day. You know, this could be due to preference, things like that. Time, that's a big one nowadays. Okay. I know that was a lot, so I'm going to stop. I don't have a question slide here. Does anybody have any questions on that? I know I have a lot of 9-hole league members here. So Maddie, do we have any questions?
Looks like Mary asked, so even though 18 holes are not played, the handicap is being calculated and impacted. The handicap is being calculated and impacting their index as if they did play 18 holes. Is that correct?
Yes. So even though 18 holes is not played, a score differential was created using the holes played and the expected score of holes not played to create an 18-hole score differential, which, yes, affects or is eligible to affect a handicap index. Yes, good question. All right. Anybody else? I know that is the big change with this current revision of the WHS. Okay.
Barb. If you only play 9 holes all the time, ladies league 9 hole, is there the option to calculate in the old way?
No, the old way has now been deleted, if you will, been updated. And then the question that I got last time in the last presentation, can you still post a total 9-hole score? And yes, you can still post a total 9-hole score, and an expected score will still be calculated for the holes not played. It's only 10 through 17 when you have to post hole by hole. Okay, good questions. Okay, if you do think of more, because I know that's a lot to digest, please feel free to write it down, send it in the chat, or we do have another question slide here coming up in a little bit. That would be perfect for that question, okay? But we're just gonna keep this train moving. All right, where am I? Okay, perfect. So the calculation of a handicap index. I know I show this all the time, and so the handicap calculation, handicap index is calculated from the lowest score differentials in a score or in a scoring record, right? But not everybody, especially individuals who are new to the game of golf and new to gin, things like that, have 20 scores. So what the system does is based on the amount of scores posted from 3 18s or 54, all the way through 20, uses an average of the lowest, 2, 3, 4, 8. The most you'll get is the lowest 8 to create a handicap index. But when an individual first starts out, 3 scores really isn't a true identifier of somebody's potential ability, because really, studies have shown that people shoot to their handicap index 1 in 5 times or 20% of the time. And so with only 3 scores, technically they couldn't even show us their true ability yet. So in order to protect the field, if this individual were to join a competition, the system will use their lowest differential at the time and actually subtract 2 from that to create their initial handicap index. Okay, and then with more information, becomes more data that Gin can comb through to determine a person's potential, and then the less of a downward adjustment the system has to make in order to protect the field. Okay, so notice after 6 scores are posted, the lowest 2 score differentials would then be averaged, and then at that point the system will no longer need to make a downward adjustment to protect the field. Okay. Okay, the calculation of a handicap index, right? Step 1, we're going to assume that individual, or in this case, everybody has 20 scores posted. So then what you would do is you would average the lowest 8 of the most 20 or the most recent 20 score differentials. You would round to the nearest 10th, right? And then you would compute the difference between the average of the lowest 8 score differentials and the lower handicap index to determine if there's a cap. And we'll kind of go over that here in a bit. Okay, so here's an example. One of the cool things in Gin is you as administrators and or the golfer themselves, every time they look in Gin, the scores that are being used to compute their handicap index will always be signified by a star in the far left-hand column. Okay, and if they have 20 scores, they will always see 8, and they will not see more than 8. And so in this case, in this example, the average of the lowest 8 score differentials would equate to a 9.9. Okay. All right, this one didn't change either, but this was a big change in 2020. It used to be where the maximum handicap indexes for both genders were different. The men would be 36.4 and the women would be 40.4. That has gone away with the WHS, which is great. And now the maximum handicap index that can be held by any player is 54.0. Okay. And this may be the case, but any committee in charge of the competition may set a maximum limit for entry if they so choose. And they may limit the playing handicap as well. All right. Frequency revision of a handicap index. This is Rule 5.4. If you haven't noticed already, this presentation kind of goes along with the way the rules of handicapping are written. So for reference, if you want to go back and take a look in the WHS later. Okay. And again, this didn't change as well, but this was a big change in 2020. Now a handicap index could potentially be revised every day, as long as the player posts a score the day before. Okay. And what does this do? It ensures the player's handicap index is as up to date as possible. It allows for the PCC to be carried out if that individual were to influence the PCC. And it ensures that scores are available for peer review as soon as possible. And we kind of mentioned that earlier. All right, the PCC, another math equation that we will never know, but we know it works because we've seen it before. The playing condition calculation is a statistical procedure, so it's all based on data and algorithms and people showing trends, right? That compares the scores posted by players on the day of play against the expected scoring based on the number and composition of the players submitting scores. We'll kind of go over some notes about that. Because each player has an expected score, or a score that players are expected to shoot based on their handicap index and course handicap. And so if significantly fewer players than anticipated achieve their expected score, conditions are determined to be harder than normal. And then vice versa, if more players than anticipated attain their expected score, conditions are then determined to be easier than normal, right? And then again, as I mentioned earlier, the adjustments will range from a -1, which means this course played easier, to a +1, +2, +3, which means that the course played harder, a little bit harder, and very hard. All right. Here's a couple of key considerations for the PCC though. So it only takes place once at midnight local time each day. So if it is not triggered that one time that night and somebody were to go post, that it's not going to re-trigger the PCC because the PCC has already been triggered once, unfortunately. It only takes into account players with 36.0 handicap indexes or less. Individuals with a 36.1 or higher, their games are a little more volatile than what the PCC would like to see. And then it also takes at least 8 acceptable scores posted to be triggered on a given day. So as I said before, if only 7 scores are posted that day and only 1 more is triggered and I didn't post, unfortunately, nobody will get the benefit of a PCC that day if conditions were just terrible, which would be unfortunate. A PCC adjustment could only apply if course is set up harder or easier than normal. Or should I say could apply if the conditions were set up harder or normal, or harder or easier than normal, such as during state competitions. Hole locations are a little bit different than normal. Greens is sped up a little bit, so that could definitely trigger a PCC. Vice versa, just a normal play day. Holes are put in the middle of each green, and the conditions are super easy that day. So course setup can also influence PCC as well. It doesn't have to be weather-based. Here's one key thing too. A manually entered course and rating result in a score not being considered for PCC. So for those that enter or who have entered a manual course rating and slope and a manual score before, unfortunately those scores will not be considered for PCC adjustment. Okay. And then finally, last but not least, this is going to be ingrained into you, and you may have nightmares of me saying this, but scores must be posted on the day of play to be included for PCC. That is the recommendation. And then again, PCC is an automatic process in GIN, and it uses an algorithm based on players posting on that golf course that day and what those conditions are. And again, it uses their actual score versus their expected score as a threshold. Okay. Okay, now let's get into some of the safeguards here. I told you this was a big block here, so thank you for bearing with me. The low handicap index. This was introduced in 2020 with the initial rollout of the WHS. Now, those of you that are new, at least to the admin portal, for every golfer will be able to see their current handicap index and their low handicap index at all times, right? And the reason being is because that low handicap index is a baseline essentially for how high a handicap index, a current handicap index, will be able to go at any one time or in a 365-day period, right? Okay, and the low handicap index is only established once a player has at least 20 scores in their score history. If they're new, they will not have a low HI until 20 scores are posted. And once a player has an established low handicap index, it is reevaluated every time a new acceptable score is submitted. Okay. And again, since it must be displayed, that is why golfers will always see a low handicap index when they log into GHIN. Okay, now here's the first safeguard that the rules of handicapping introduced to us: the hard cap, soft cap, suppression restriction device, I like to call it. Okay, a soft cap is a suppression mechanism. What it does is it affects how quickly a handicap index can increase. And then the hard cap also affects how quickly a handicap index, but not affects it, it restricts it, right? So it first gets affected by the soft cap, and then once it reaches the hard cap, it can't go up any further until committee action or until the low handicap index increases. All right, and so there's a couple different things I want you to remember here. I want you to think the number 3, a hill and a wall, because the number 3 is used to determine if there is a cap at all. The hill is also known as a soft cap. It's a little bit harder to get over the hill, but you can still do so. Just takes a little more effort, right? Which is the soft cap, takes a little more effort to increase the handicap index. But once it gets to the wall, that's it. You can't go through the wall. You're stopped until that wall is removed, right? And the wall being the low handicap index. Okay, so let's take a look at the math here. Okay, so here's our soft cap example. So player A has a low HI of 10 and a current 8 out of 20 average of 15.2, right? Or their current handicap index of 15.2, right? They just posted a score that calculated this, 15.2, okay? So now what the system will do is step 1 will be to subtract the low HI from that current recently calculated number. So 15.2 minus 10 would give us 5.2. Then, here's where the number 3 comes into play. The system will then determine how much greater than 3 that number is. So in this case, it'll be 2.2. Finally, the system will subtract 50% of that resulting value from the 8 out of 20 average. All right, so 50% of 2.2 is 1.1. You then take the 8 out of 20 average of 15.2, subtract 1.1, giving us a soft capped value of 14.1. Again, that is automatically done for you. The system will do all the work. There is no need for you to know how to do this unless, again, you're a math person and really like to know the nuts and bolts of how things work, like I do, which is why I enjoy explaining this part. Okay, and so in the admin portal, this is what that'll look like. Again, low HI, it was achieved 4/7/2021. And then this individual here would be soft capped. And then with a soft cap comes this little eye icon here. If you or the player were to hover over the eye that is seen in GHIN or the admin portal, it'll tell you your handicap index has been soft capped, and it'll give you an explanation. Okay. Now a hard cap, right? In order to get to a hard cap, you must first go through the soft cap equation, right? So in this example, player A has a low HI of 10, and now his current 8 out of 20 average is 17.4. So we do that math again. So we subtract the low from the current, which is 7.4. You then see how much higher that number is than 3, which would then equate to 4.4. Finally, you then subtract 50% of that 4.4 from the current 8 out of 20 average. 50% of 4.4, 2.2, 17.4 minus 2.2 would give us 15.2, right? Well, yes and no. So a hard cap is when a player's current handicap index after going through the soft cap reaches 5 strokes or higher than the low handicap index. So this is currently 15.2, which is 0.2 higher than where it can go. So the system will instead hard cap this handicap index at a 15.0. Right? So here's what a hard cap will look like in the GIN system. I got a 12.1 low HI achieved on 7/29/2021, and I am hard capped at 17.1. Again, it's 5 strokes higher. Okay. And you can erase a hard cap, one by committee action, essentially increasing the low HI for a period of time, and or letting the system work itself out and having that low HI update over time as well. 2 ways you can get rid of the hard cap. And here's a couple key messages for players on this, because I know this was newly introduced in 2020. Some people started seeing it in 2021. A lot more people started seeing it in 22 and 23. So we get a lot of questions on this. But so key messages is 1, the cap is part of the handicap index calculation and is applied automatically. Again, you don't need to do anything on your end. The system will do it all for you. And what does it do? It ensures that a temporary loss of form does not cause the player's handicap index to increase to a level that is inconsistent with their demonstrated ability. Okay. And then the purpose of the caps is to provide equity and ensure that players' chances of playing to their handicap is consistent with everybody else. Again, 1 in 5 times, or about 20% of the time. And interesting enough, research suggests that most players who experience a cap will actually return to their normal, if you will, demonstrated ability. And in many cases, the impact of the soft cap is only a few tenths of a stroke and may not result in a change in their course handicap, which is interesting. Although we do know individuals who get injured or who haven't played golf in a while, and those are cases when the committee would want to take action and adjust their handicaps appropriately. And we'll kind of go over what that looks like or how to do that here in the committee section of today. Okay, and the final safeguard introduced with the WHS that hasn't changed, thank goodness, is the ESR, or the exceptional score reduction, right? It identifies exceptional scores, which may indicate that the player's true ability. And this table, it's very small, but it is very impactful for those of you who have seen one of these before. And what does the ESR do? Well, the ESR looks at the number of strokes the score differential of the score just posted is lower than the player's handicap index. And so if that score differential is between 7 to 9.9 strokes lower as the handicap index at the time it was posted, an ESR of -1 will be applied to not only that score, but the previous 19 scores as well, thus affecting the handicap index. All right. And then if the score differential of the score posted is 10 or more strokes better than the current handicap index at the time the score is posted, you will see an exceptional score reduction of -2, not only to that score, but to the previous 19 scores as well. And if there are multiple ESRs, you will actually see them double up, which would really affect the handicap index potentially. Okay, let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, so here's our score history and our current handicap index of 10.0. Here's the 8 scores being used. Here's what their differentials are. I won't go through all of those, but their current handicap index is a 10.0. All right. So in this example, this player is going to post a score of 75, which will equate to a 2.9 score differential. Remember, our handicap index is 10 right now, right? So which means it's between that 7 to 9.9 difference, if you will. So what that's going to do is trigger a -1 adjustment to the score differentials, not to the score differentials, not only that score that was just posted, but the previous 19 scores as well. And after all of that math, this individual went from a 10 handicap index down to a 7.9. Right? And then the good thing about ESRs though, they don't stay in your handicap index for 365 days or anything like that. They're designed to be played out of. And so after the player starts posting more scores again, the scores posted after the ESR was triggered will not be affected by that ESR. Okay, again, I know there's not a question slide there, but any questions about that? Maddie, do we have any questions?
The only one that got asked was, who reports PCC?
Again, PCC is an automatic process in the system, so nobody reports it. It's just based on data, whether or not it's triggered or not. Okay. All right. That was easy. Okay. This section right here is by far the biggest and most noteworthy, if you will, minus the expected score. Okay. Again, if you do have questions, please be sure to either save them for the question slide or put them in the chat function there, and Maddie will read them out to us. Okay. So, course handicap and playing handicap. Course handicap calculation. It's very important to know your course handicap because it determines your net double bogey score, right? And it is used for net events. So it's always good to know where you receive pops when you're playing against somebody who also receives pops. Okay, so the course handicap calculation converts a handicap index to the number of strokes needed. Here's the key: to play to par of the tees being played, right? So your course handicap will not be the same for any one tee set on the same course anymore. It used to be that way, which I never understood, but with the new WHS, with course rating minus par being built in to the equation, your course handicap will never be the same on two tee sets on the same golf course, okay? And here is the equation, right? You take your handicap index, you multiply it by the slope of the tees divided by 113. There's that number again, also known as standard slope. You then take the sum of that and you add it to course rating minus par of the tees being played, right? And here's that information here. You got an 11 HI, or a handicap index of 11, rating of 71.7, slope of 132, and par of 72. And you input it into the appropriate areas, and you get a rounded course handicap number of 13. Right? So in this case, it'll take me 13 shots to shoot to my handicap, which will happen 20% of the time, or 1 in 5 times. But what this number will also help you do is determine what your target score is. And this also helps the PCC, right? Because the PCC uses the difference between your target score and the score actually produced to determine whether or not the course is playing easier or harder. And then, if more and more people show the same trend, the likelihood of a PCC being triggered is higher. If not, then there's going to be no PCC anyway. Okay. But anyway, this is not in the book or anything like that. But I always like to mention target score. And all target score is par of the tees being played plus the course handicap that was calculated. You can either do it by hand, or your app or gin.com will do it for you. So just add your course handicap to par, and that'll be what your target score is for the day. I really like this example here because it'll show you we have easy set of tees in silver, we have a moderate set of tees in white, and a difficult set of tees in green. And it'll see their rating, the slope, and par of each of those sets of tees. We'll do the math for each of them. And so my course handicap, as expected, will increase with the increase in difficulty from each tee, and vice versa. It'll decrease with the decrease in difficulty of each tee, as determined by the rating and slope. And with the decrease in course handicap, you can also expect that the amount of strokes needed to play to par from those sets of tees would go down as well. And your expected score would also go down, right? So I really like that slide a lot. Again, you won't find this in the book, but I really like to just showcase this. And a good goal for yourselves, if you really want to challenge yourself, is to shoot to your expected score, because then that would mean you shot to your handicap that day, which is pretty cool. Also, it might throw you off mentally a little bit, so maybe not. So it's up to you whether or not you want to do that. Okay. Moving on. Okay. Now, with the WHS in 2020, there was an introduction of what is now known as the playing handicap calculation, right? And the playing handicap determines the number of strokes each player gives or receives, enabling equity amongst the players of all handicap levels within different formats of the game, right? And so all the playing handicap is you take your unrounded course handicap. This one is key here. Your unrounded course handicap multiplied by the handicap allowance of the game being played that day. And again, there's a whole table in the back of the WHS in the rules of handicapping in the appendices. We'll kind of go over briefly here towards the end, but it has all the different recommended handicap allowances for each of the games. Not for all the games, but for the big ones that people play all the time. Okay. And so, when multiple tees are played using different pars, although this is very rare nowadays, there's no additional adjustment required for the difference in course rating and slope, which used to be the case back in the day. But if par is different on a hole in match play, the player with the lowest net score would win the hole. Okay. And then here is kind of the calculation that you would get if there is a difference in par and playing handicap. Again, unrounded course handicap multiplied by the handicap allowance plus or minus the difference in par. And then there's more information in Rule 6.2b, but since it's not super common, we'll just kind of briefly mention it today. Okay. And now, this is a good slide too, because it tells you the difference. A lot of people have a hard time distinguishing this, especially if they're new to the game. So what a course handicap is used for is general recreational play, determines your target score, and it is used for adjusting hole scores for net double bogey / double bogey plus. Right? And all the playing handicap is used for is for the purposes of game and competition. Because for scores posted to GIN, we would always use the course handicap and not the playing handicap. Okay? And remember, a good way to remember these things is course handicap is you against the course, playing handicap is you against other players. Super easy. Any questions about that? I know that was a long section full of information. So I'm hoping one of you guys have some questions. If not, that means I'm doing a good job explaining. So there's that as well. But if you have any questions, please feel free to either put them in the chat and or unmute yourself and ask. Maddie, do we have anything?
We do not.
All right, perfect. Well, in that case, it is about 11:36. We have maybe about 45 minutes-ish of data or of stuff to talk about. So let's take a 10-minute break and we'll reconvene at 11:46. So everybody go re-up on some coffee, take a bathroom break, and we'll be right back at 11:36. There we go. I got rid of that yellow line.
Hey, Aaron. You're on mute, but hi, Aaron.
Yep.
This is
Hey.
Bartender.
Yes.
I accidentally got knocked off. And can you show me the pages 42 through 44?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, let's see.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. One thing that is most certain about technology is it won't work right all the time.
True. It's partly my fault. I've been screen printing the ones that were specific to the changes for 2024. So I accidentally did something. I have no idea what it was.
Okay, so here's 42.
Okay. All right. So I
Okay.
have another question. If you play, let's say you play 14 holes, but you didn't play
Mhm.
hole number 10, is it okay just to leave 10 blank, because it was one that they were doing maintenance on? And then you entered, so you'd enter 1 through 9, 10 would be blank, and 11, 12, 13, 14 would be populated.
To my understanding, yes.
Okay. All
Because
right.
then what it would do, it would use the expected score for any holes not played. But again, if that hole was under construction, that is one of the only places now that you can use net par for handicap purposes. So if hole 10 was indeed under construction, the recommendation,
Yeah.
so the recommendation there would be to use net par for that hole only, and then put down the scores for holes played, and then use expected score, or let expected score do its thing for the holes not played.
Perfect. Okay. You can go on to 43 if
Mhm.
you want.
Yeah, there's 43. And then
All right, I got that.
there's 44.
The course rating is based on.
So Aaron, will you be sending out this PDF?
I will not. So unfortunately, I will not be able to send out this PowerPoint.
Okay.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yep, no problem, Barb.
Aaron, before you
I'm
go,
actually going to
I'm
finish
misspaced.
that here in a second.
Hey, before you go too far, can you go back to 38?
38. Let's see here. There you go. 38.
Thank you. Good to go.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. All right. So let me get back to where we were. Everybody close your eyes. This might hurt if you're staring at the screen.
Hey, Aaron, it's Kay Dugard. I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Kay.
I just, while we were taking a break, went back into Gin just to take a look at my scores for the last year. And I found one on 917 and I found the differential applied. That was a match play day and I evidently played 17 holes. Would it have gone back to 2013 and applied a score differential to that
No.
last hole? Yeah, I'll want me to send you the screenshot.
I don't think so.
I didn't think
Yeah,
so
if
either,
you
but I
wouldn't
saw
mind.
it. Yeah, I'll email that to
Yeah.
you. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no, because I know an email was sent out by us here to everybody who had a lingering 9-hole score about what to do with that 9-hole score. Because any 9-hole scores as of January 16th would essentially just be hanging out in people's score history, not affecting the handicap index, nor would it be eligible. So, yeah, send me what you got there, Kay. And
Yeah,
I can take a look.
because evidently I probably played 17 holes that day. If I need to, I can go back to the pro shop and have them give me the scorecard and I can take a look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just
I'll
send me
send
what
you
you
that
got.
screenshot.
Yeah, thank you. If you wouldn't mind.
Nope, I
Okay.
can do that.
Perfect. Thanks, Kay. All right. So before we get going here, it's 11:47. Let's get this Ro on the show. I know Ro asked about if I'll be sending out this this PowerPoint. Unfortunately, I cannot. The USGA does not want me sending this out to anyone here. So unfortunately, I will not be able to do that. The good thing though is this session is recorded, so you can watch it at any time once it's uploaded to our website. Okay. And I have another question here. Would you happen to have a condensed version we can share with our members? Again, unfortunately, I don't. Really, what we'll have here is the recording of this, and hopefully that'll help. Next year, I'm planning to condense this a lot because this presentation in particular is supposed to be only for committee members to help them pass the exam, or for individuals who are looking to be on the handicap committee, or help with the handicap committee at some point or in some sort of form or fashion. And then Jim, so sorry I missed you there, my man. Do you have a suggestion on how to best communicate expected score to golfers? My suggestion would be very similar to that of the PCC. It's an automatic process that uses the average of average scores of individuals with similar handicap indexes as whomever you're talking to on a course of standard difficulty. That's probably the easiest way to explain it high level without going into too much detail. To say a handicap differential will be calculated for holes played, then the expected score differential will be calculated for holes not played, added together to equal an 18-hole score differential. So hopefully that helps there, Jim. I got a thumbs up. All right, perfect. Appreciate you there. Okay, so section 4. Section 4 is going to be all about committee actions here. I do have a couple of screenshots from the admin portal on how to do things. But again, myself, Maddie, and Kim are all available to help out for questions about the admin portal at any time. So feel free, if you want to know how to do something that you kind of missed here today, feel free to give us a call or send us an email, okay? All right, so the committee actions. One, thank you for being on the committee of your club. That is, some people just refuse to do it. Some people don't like doing it. Some people like doing it way too much. So for all and for everybody in between, thank you very much for doing this position. The USGA appreciates you and what you do, and I appreciate you and what you do as well. It's not easy at times, for sure. And again, if you're new to the position, the handicap committee has the responsibility of ensuring that the players at the club have a handicap index that best represents their demonstrated ability. All right, to fulfill that duty, the handicap committee has the discretion to conduct a review at any time, whether or not they get a tip from a member or if they just do an annual review, a scheduled review. It's really up to the committee to determine what their frequency is of review and or whether or not to do one. But the recommendation is to always do at least one annually, okay? And then some clubs go in deeper than others, so it's up to the committee to determine what that looks like for their club and their club's needs, okay? Okay, one of the big things, especially for individuals who haven't played golf in a while and that are just picking the game back up after an injury or something like that, is adjusting a handicap index. That's going to be one of the big duties of the handicap committee. And so in order to do that appropriately, you want to consider all available evidence that you have, right? And then from there, you must decide whether or not there's going to be a modification of some sort. And there's two ways you can modify somebody. You can reset their handicap index by adjusting, a point, 2 points to their recent 20 score differentials. Again, we saw with the ESRs that will really adjust the handicap index. You'll kind of see it here at the bottom. 8 out of 20 average was 10.3. They modified this individual down by 1 point, adjusting their handicap index to a 9.3. All right. And then another thing you can do is freeze their handicap at any level for a period of time not to exceed 365 days. At that time, you would definitely want to reassess whether or not that person's handicap index needs to remain freezed or if you need to extend it or what what additional actions may need to be done for this individual to help their handicap index better reflect their potential as a golfer. All right. There are a couple of things that you have to remember when making a modification or an adjustment to an HI, whether that be the current or the low. That once the review is complete, any adjustment must be at least 1 point, either up or down, must not exceed 5 strokes, because again, once you do that, then it's going to be capped some sort if it's not 5. And it must not exceed 365 days. So that it must have an expiration date that does not exceed 365 days. All right. And the final thing is the player must be informed and has had an opportunity to appeal that decision if requested. Okay, so those are the 3 key things that any modification to a handicap index must be done for any player. Okay. All right. And what I always recommend too is any adjustment to a modification be made based on analytical data seen in their playing history, because any numbers outside of that might be hard to use. It can still be used because it's at your discretion on what the modification is, but I always like to base any decision on data that is in the player's history because they've demonstrated that they're able to do something. Okay. And this is kind of what adjusting a handicap index looks like in the admin portal, right? So when you log into a golfer. This just so happens to be me. Okay, I have a handicap index of 4.6 with a low HI of 3.9, and that was back in 2020. My handicap index is no longer that low, unfortunately. But there are 4 buttons here on the initial default page that you're brought to under handicap management. Modify HI, modify low HI, withdraw HI, and special update. 2 that you're going to want to use to modify anybody would be the first 2. So you're able to modify this one and this one if you would like. And once you click one of those, it'll bring you this box. In this case, I click the modify low HI button. I'm going to modify it down to, or up to whatever I need it to. And then you'll see that an expiration date is required in order for me to continue and save this process. Okay. So pretty easy, super user friendly, but just in case you wanted to see an example, there it is for you. All right, now penalty scores. I always love talking about this one because there are clubs out there that never give out penalty scores, and there are clubs out there that give them out like Tic Tac. And then there's everything in between. So those are the 2 extremes. So, but penalty scores can be given out. What I always recommend with penalty scores is that you have some process in which somebody can earn a penalty score. Because the one thing you don't want to do is just give them out without any prerequisite, right? And what is a penalty score intention? Well, it's intended to lower an individual's handicap index equal to the highest score differential in their last 19 scores, or it is intended to raise their handicap index equal to the lowest score differential in their last 19 scores. There's 2 different options when giving somebody a penalty score. And then for someone who is a repeat offender, the handicap committee could and should consider either withdrawing their handicap index or taking other disciplinary action. All right. So here's an example of a policy that has been adopted by many clubs, although I think there should be one additional step here. It's for those of you who like baseball, 3-strike sort of deal here. The first strike would be the first failure to post. That individual would be given a written warning. Second strike would be second failure to post, and a penalty score would be issued for score or scores not posted. And a third failure to post, further disciplinary action would be given and decided upon by the handicap committee. I think that's a bit extreme. I think a 3-strike warning policy should be in place, or that's the one that I recommend. The first one would be a verbal, second strike would be a written, third strike would be a meeting, and a penalty score. The good thing about penalty scores is it's not a modification, and penalty scores can be applied without the individual being involved in the process. But again, the final decision is up to the committee on how they want to determine how somebody earns a penalty score. All right. And in the admin portal, it's pretty easy to give these out. So you would go to the post score tab, right? It wouldn't be a hole by hole, it would be a total score. So you would click total score, and it has its own box. It's always nice when things have their own boxes. And then you can choose whether or not you want to manually apply it, which would mean applying it to every whole score or every differential, or you can automatically have it applied. And you can choose whether or not you want it to be a high penalty type or a low penalty type. And then post. And then another change this year is the option to post a 9-hole penalty score will no longer be available. It'll always be an 18-hole penalty score. All right. Okay. Now, the committee in charge of competition, right? Wink, wink, for whatever reason, this one doesn't have a red flag here. Wink, wink. The committee in charge of competition may set entry and eligibility conditions with their terms of competition. So for example, the committee can set a maximum handicap index limit for entry. Hang on a second. My apologies here. I was letting somebody in. There we go. They can set a maximum course handicap. They can set a maximum playing handicap for competition. And they also reserve the right to adjust the playing handicap before or between rounds of competition. Notice in there, one of the things they cannot do is adjust a handicap index. That would be up to the handicap committee of the player's home club to do so. Okay, so a competition committee cannot adjust a handicap index, but they can adjust everything seen on the screen. Okay, just know you may want to remember that. Okay, questions about that? Maddie, do we have any questions there? Oh, where'd she go? Oh, there she is. Okay.
There we go. So we have one question. Is it permissible for the committee to start an adjustment to a handicap index that is not posted to the portal, i.e. adopt its own parameters of exceptional play that would result in an adjustment that only applies to club events, the effect of which is to not affect the members' GIN for the competition against the rest of the world?
I'm assuming you are referring to creating a handicap index based on a smaller subset of scores, such as what people used to know as a Tindex or a tournament index. Yeah, so that what you do not want to do is modify a player's handicap index in GIN with that, because that is only using a subset of scores, whereas the handicap index uses data not from just league scores, uses data from everyday play as well. But the committee in charge of competition can determine whatever they want. So if they want to use, calculated indexes using handicap information available to them based on score type, they can certainly do that, but that is up to the committee to do that as well. Unfortunately, that'll be a manual process, as you will not be able to get only that information from the system. But you can certainly do that if you have somebody and the individual wants to put in the time to do that. There are some clubs around the state that do that for their events only.
And then can you walk us
Okay.
through steps to take an annual handicap index review of club players?
Yeah, again, so there's not one way to do this because every club is different. Every club has a different number of members. Smaller clubs would only take them maybe 10 minutes, whereas clubs with hundreds of players could potentially take multiple days. So really what you would want to do is just run a couple different reports, which I'll show you which reports I have. And there's actually an introduction of a new tool that I kind of mentioned earlier that'll really help with this. That'll make handicap committee members' jobs much quicker and easier. That I'll show you there. But in terms of going through each one by one, I'm not sure that would be necessary because there's information available to you that'll help expedite that process to potentially help weed out individuals who could and or should need a modification to their handicap index. But good question. We'll kind of go over that here in a second.
Awesome. Next would be, would you quickly review the difference between course handicap and playing handicap?
Okay, that's a good one. Leanne, thank you for that. So remember, a course handicap is you versus the course, and a playing handicap is you versus your playing competitors. So a course handicap helps determine what your target score is. It also helps determine your net double bogey score for each hole, right? Or your maximum score for each hole. So that's a course handicap. All a playing handicap is if you're playing in an event where something other than 100% of your course handicap is being played, such as 4-ball stroke play, where 95% is being used versus 100, then a playing handicap, again, would just be that adjusted course handicap, right? So it's essentially the number of strokes that you're going to need to play versus everybody else that day, but that's it. I hope that makes sense. Hey, anything else so far? All right, anybody else have any questions? Good, good, good. All right, so now we're going to get to the appendices. We are on slide 124, and there's 163 in case people are keeping track. We're almost done, I promise. Got some good stuff here coming up for you. Okay, so here's some appendices. First one, handicap allowances. This kind of is a perfect segue, Leanne, to your question about playing handicaps, right? Because in order to calculate a playing handicap, you're going to be using something other than 100% of a full course handicap. And so in the appendices, and specifically Appendix C, in the new rules of handicapping, you will find updated recommended handicap allowance. The key thing I want you to see here is this word right here, recommended, right? So if you so choose, you don't have to use these, but these are what the USGA recommends based on a normal field size, which we'll go over what that means here in a second. Right, the one change is 4-ball match play. Instead of 95% is now 90. And then there is an addition of a 3-person scramble. So before we used to only have 4 and 2, now we have 2-person scramble, 3-person scramble, and a 4-person scramble, and a recommendation on how to handicap those. Okay. Other than that, everything else remained fairly similar. But this can be found in Appendix C in the new rules of handicapping, which for those of you who perused our website can now be seen and downloaded from our website. Okay, so field size and makeup have an impact on equity and may be taken into consideration when determining handicap allowances for specific events, especially for individual stroke play events or formats, should I say. So the recommended allowance for those is typically 95% for all individual stroke play formats, and it's based on median size field net events, which is a field somewhere between 30 to 100 players, right? However, for a field size of fewer than 30 players, a handicap allowance of 100% should be considered. Again, you don't have to do it. It's up to the committee ultimately to what they want to do there, but that's what the recommendation is by the USGA. Additionally, if there's a significant percentage of higher handicap players in the field, a lower allowance could be considered. For example, 90% instead of 95. And then in this case, you probably want to flag it as well. but that's neither here nor there. So, wink, wink. You may want to pay attention to this one here. So here's how to read this, okay? So you have your field makeup, right? Or your handicap range. If you have a small field size here, which can be seen small, less than 30, medium, 30 to 100, and or large. And then here's some recommendations here. So for lower handicap players, you should use something higher than the recommended allowance of 95% based on field size, all right? And then for normal distribution, you'll see what the recommendations are here. And then for more higher handicap players, small field size, you'd want to use the same. And for medium and or large field sizes, you'd want to use potentially a higher or a lower recommended handicap allowance due to higher handicap players, having more higher handicap players. Okay, and then again, kind of as I mentioned before, as a side note, in that case for larger fields, you may want to consider using flights consisting of different handicap ranges. And there's, in the committee guide, which I'm trying to figure out how to post that, it'll tell you how the USGA recommends a committee field or flight their fields. Okay. Handicap review. All right. So here's kind of going along with the question I got from, let's see, from Deb, I believe it was. So, handicap review considerations, right? Any type of handicap review should involve the analysis of one or more of the following: the player's scoring record history, the trend of the player's handicap index, or differences in player's handicap index over the past year or even 2 years, depending on how deep you want to go, deviations from the expected scoring performance of the player, percent of acceptable scores submitted by the home club, scores posted from tournaments versus regular play, that is the big one, and any other information that's available to the committee. And kind of as I hinted at a little earlier, there's actually going to be an introduction of what is going to be known as a handicap tool, all right? That will help the committee with all of this stuff, if you will, all of the data, and help sort through the data, right? So again, kind of as I mentioned before, it is strongly recommended that the handicap committee conduct a review at least once every 12 months. And it must be consistent and objective, right? So you don't want to, the last thing you want to do is kind of, you know, just focus on one or two individuals. You want to make sure that the same course of action is being used for all members, right? So there's a new handicap review tool that will essentially give you recommendations based on standard deviations and score history of all of your players. And from my understanding, what you will do is be able to go into this review tool, click it, and it'll have a recommendation, a modification recommendation of, again, of at least one for members that have been flagged, right? So this is how it's going to work, right? There's going to be certain equations and math done on the back end that'll help kind of flag, or what is going to be known as flag, individuals who have deviations to what is expected of their scoring, right? Oops. Players can always have a good and bad day, and the tolerance for those will be kind of triggered, right? So individuals who continually have bad days will be flagged, and individuals who will continually have extra good days will be flagged as well. And the frequency of those will be taken into consideration. And so an upward adjustment recommendation will be given for individuals who have flags of the following, right? So if there's at least 1 to 4 teen scores posted and 3 or more flags have been seen, a recommendation of at least 1 upwards will be given. And then again, with the more length of time and the more flags that are produced, the higher recommendation that individual will get. and that'll be for an upward adjustment. And then the same thing can be seen for a downward adjustment. The longer length of time and the more flags that are produced, the more of adjustment that will be seen. Okay. And so players are evaluated through an automatic process, an iterative, done by this tool. If a player is identified for a recommended handicap adjustment of at least 1, the evaluation will not only run, but it'll also run again after that modification to determine whether or not the player needs to be further modified. And it'll keep doing so until the system believes that they no longer need a modification to their handicap index, which is pretty cool. So if they need something greater than 1, that'll be determined after it is reran. Okay, and it's automatically done. All that needs to be, all that you would need to do, to my understanding, is just click the button that triggers that modification or that recommendation. Okay. So, for instance, if an analysis done by the system shows that an upward adjustment of 2 to the player's handicap index is sufficient, then that will be the recommendation that is given to the handicap committee by the tool. Again, you don't have to do anything besides just press that button and the recommendation will be spit out to you. And the one key thing I want you to know about that is, yes, even though a recommendation was given to you, you do not have to follow through with that recommendation if you so choose. Okay, so here's an example. Super straightforward. So Bruce approaches home club's committee about a member whose handicap index has suddenly risen above his usual range for whatever reason. The handicap committee conducted a review, mostly involving that tool, and that tool spit out a recommendation of a downward adjustment of 1.0. And then the handicap committee agrees with this recommendation. Again, you don't have to move forward with it if you don't have to, but they agree with that recommendation. And after giving Trey the opportunity to appeal, again, that has to be part of the process when modifying, they then inform the player that the adjustment will be applied. And then this is before the adjustment, and this is after the adjustment. And of course, any modification that you do either to a current handicap index or a low handicap index will be followed by an M. Okay. And then you're like, okay, well, where's this report going to live? Well, it's going to live in reports, which is good. It's not going to be in some special place. But here's also a couple of other things that I always like to mention during these trainings, in case you're new to the admin portal and new to the committee. That could be helpful for you. So if you log in, you'll be taken to your Manage tab, and then the report section is where you're going to find all the reports. Click on it, and then you're automatically going to be taken to My Reports, most likely, unless the former individual, or if you've done this before, you won't have too many reports in My Reports section. But what you'll do is navigate to the templates. And when you do, you'll see the entire list of template reports that you have available to you, okay? And again, in April sometime, hopefully the beginning of April, that new tool will be listed in here now, but this is what is currently available to you in the admin portal. The big ones I want to highlight is the capped golfer report. This will show you everybody who's capped, and those individuals are capped. You may want to look at that. So this could be part of that process. Like, why are these individuals capped? Somebody have an injury? Is somebody who hasn't played golf for a while back playing and needs to be adjusted for a period of time? That would be one place where you can figure out, who you need to investigate a little further. The exceptional score reduction report, this will show you anybody and everyone who's had an ESR in the past 365 days. Although you can set it for longer than that if you want. The one that is frequently used, maybe not necessarily for committee actions, but just frequently used that I like to mention is the Handicap Index Course Handicap Report. That's available to you. Handicap Index History Report, that's always a good one, just to see what an individual's history is over a period of time. And then the most improved golfer report, which a lot of committees like to use towards the end of the year when looking at awards and things like that. So that's where this lives. And in order to run one of these, you wouldn't click schedule, you would click view. And then you would just select the filters that you want to show, and it'll spit out the information that you tell it to spit out. And again, the new handicap tool will be available in the report section of the admin portal. Okay, it just won't be available until April. Almost done, promise. Okay, this one is very brief. The golf course rating and slope rating. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this at least a little bit. Course rating system is now being used worldwide by both the RNA and USGA. And so I believe, to my knowledge, the majority of courses around the world are now rated using the same system, which is awesome. Because when I did this first presentation with the first revision to the World Handicap System, or the introduction to the World Handicap System, only the US and a handful of courses over in Europe were rated at the time.
Hey,
now
Aaron.
I believe the entire world is now. Yes.
Hey, before you go too far into this section, there was a few questions from the last section that I really wanted to hear the answer to before you get into this section.
Yeah, Dee, I'm almost to the question slide here, and then I'll address all of those. This is very quick.
Thanks.
I promise. Yep. Perfect. So now here's a couple key terms I just want you to know. You're not going to need to know. Well, you may need to know one of these for the exam. But a course rating, right? A lot of people determine the difficulty of a course based on the slope, when in actuality the slope actually isn't calculated in itself when rating a course, because all the slope is the difference between a scratch player and a bogey player, right? So a scratch player is defined by somebody who has a 0.0 handicap index, and a bogey player is somebody who has a 20.0 if you're a male and a 24.0 handicap index if you're a female. And again, all the slope is, rise over run, the difference between a scratch and a bogey. And the higher the slope is, that means the difficulty for the bogey player would be a little bit higher, or would be higher than it is for scratch, or further away, right? And the easier the course is, the bogey player difficulty would be closer to the scratch player difficulty. That's a good way of thinking of it. So when determining the difficulty of a set of tees, don't use slope, use the rating. And then fun fact here for slope rating, it is capped at 155. But when we did a rating, one of my raters built his own Excel tool, and 90% of a course rating is actually yardage, right? So the longer the yardage, the higher the rating will be. And so one of the back tees for the sanctuary, actually, if you take out the 155 cap, if you will, for the ladies, the slope would have been 171, which is interesting. That just shows you how difficult that set of tees would be for the bogey player at the course. So, and this is what you'll see if you go to look for these kind of on the USGA website, and you'll also see some information like this if you go look at the course handicap conversion charts on our website as well. Okay, one of my final slides is one of the final updates to this revision of the WHS, and that is the new minimum length of a golf course. Again, the new minimum length is 750 yards for 9 holes, or 1,500 yards for 18. Okay, wink, wink. And then the one thing I do want to mention here, so if a short course has a 9 over 750 yards, and the other 9 holes is under 750 yards, a couple things can happen here, because the total would technically be over that 1,500 yard threshold, but one of the 9s would not be eligible for a course rating. So the front 9 in this case would receive a 9-hole rating and slope, but the back 9 would not. But there would still be an 18-hole course rating and slope rating. So only the 9 holes or the full 18 would be able to be played in order to post a score here. How this works out in terms of, you know, everything else, I'm not quite sure yet because I haven't seen this done yet. But once it happens, I'm definitely going to take note, and you can call the office here and kind of check up on me with this one, and if you're curious to know how this will work out in terms of score posting. Okay, and then so kind of as I mentioned, first 9 scores postable, second 9 scores not postable, total 18, and post a score. All right, benefits of this change: it's portable. It allows scores to be acceptable for handicap purposes at many more golf courses at our par 3s that a lot of people get introduced to initially when they're starting out playing golf. It's inclusive. Now, short courses, regular courses, long courses will all be included in the WHS calculation. And it is modern and supportive of the overarching theme of the WHS, which is to introduce golfers of all types to the game of golf. Okay. Now, I know we have a lot of questions here. So let's kind of get to those here, Maddie.
Cool. We will start
from the top.
Where we left off. So, what is considered low handicap, normal, and high?
So a low handicap would be, and so a low handicap is whatever that individual's lowest handicap was over a 365-day period. But I'm assuming you're talking about that one slide that showed the table. So that would be determined by the committee at the time, as well as the players in the field. So low for some people could be 5 and under. Low for some clubs may be 10 and under. So it's really up to the club itself and the individuals within that club. And then also up to the committee to determine what their definition of low is based on those parameters. And then normal as well, and then high as well. So for some, so just one more thing on that. For some clubs, they actually limit individuals who have a handicap index of 36.1 and above to actually not be in their league. So their high might be different than somebody who allows, or a club that allows individuals with, regardless of the handicap index. But it is ultimately up to the club to determine those standards.
Cool.
Okay.
Next one will be, what percentage of clubs in Colorado have a handicap committee? Is this required by the CGA?
The majority of clubs in the state have a handicap committee or a handicap person, and it is not required by the CGA. It's actually required by the USGA to have somebody provide peer review. And due to this, if they do not have it, they cannot actually be certified. So they need to have somebody who is actually certified in the rules of handicapping, and so they know what they're providing, you know, help for, if you will. Does every club need to have a 3-person committee? No, it could be, some clubs have a committee that oversees all the clubs at the course. Some clubs have a committee of 1. Some clubs use the individual staff at the course, although that is not the recommendation, but that is the case for some, you know, for some clubs. But every club must have at least one person who knows the rules of handicapping, who can go into the admin portal and make modifications based on their knowledge.
Perfect.
Good question, Michelle.
Next one will go, how is the player notified of a handicap adjustment?
That would be up to the committee. Again, penalty scores, you do not need to notify the player of when they achieve one. But any modification to their handicap committee would need to be communicated to them probably via email or written letter or meeting from the committee to that individual.
Perfect. Next one is, what is the name of the system you are showing examples from? And is there a tutorial available for those who are not familiar with it?
Yeah, good question. So that is the GIN admin portal. That is the backside of GIN. So anybody who's on the handicap committee of their club or the committee of their club at all, president, handicap chair, whomever, usually the president and or the current members of the chair or of the committee decide who has access to that. Some people don't want too many hands in the pie, if you will. Some people want everybody in there. So then it's up to them to determine who has access and who does not. Normal players in the league who are not on the committee, unfortunately, will not have access to this. And is there a tutorial available for it? There is not, unfortunately, but if you do want a quick training, feel free to reach out to Maddie and I, and we can help take you through the big ticket items kind of on a one-on-one basis for like 30 minutes at a later date if you would like.
Cool. Does course rating actually come from scratch players playing on the course?
Yes. So when we rate a course, right, we rate for 2 players. That's the scratch player and a bogey player. And we would rate that for every tee set throughout the course, as long as that tee set wants a rating. If you don't want a rating, then we won't have any of our players play. But in order to achieve a rating, both our universal scratch player, as defined by a 0 handicap index, and our universal bogey players, 20.0 for men, 24.0 for women, handicap indexes must play each tee set. And that's how we get a rating based on not only length, but also obstacle difficulty for each of those players.
Then the
Hopefully that
last,
helps. I know that's
yeah.
a high level explanation, but that's really, without going into the weeds, how that works.
The next one is Deb. She said that she is confused on the slide that says that hole 10 to 18 cannot be posted.
Yes, so that slide referred to the fact that it does not meet the yardage eligibility requirement. It was only 700 yards, which means that it did not meet the 750-yard minimum threshold. So any scores posted on that 9-hole individually would not be able to be posted. But on the front 9, which was 800 yards, scores from that does meet the 750-yard threshold. Therefore, scores can be posted from that 9 holes.
Perfect. The last one is, can you request a new course rating?
No. So there is one reason that a course would be taken out of their 8-year cycle. And yes, courses are re-rated every 8 years. Adding new bunkers is actually only one taking away bunkers and slight changes to the course actually doesn't affect the rating too much, because it is only one obstacle on a handful of holes. So whenever a course calls and just says that that's the only thing they've done, is not a case for a new rating. But say for instance, a course does a complete renovation of their golf course, such as Boomerang redid their entire back 9 a couple years ago, that would be a case for a re-rate. Otherwise, we would like to keep courses in their 8-year cycle as they're evenly spread amongst each other. And we don't have to try to stack work on top of what we're currently doing, because each year we rate about 30 to 35 courses, which actually takes a complete 4 months to do. A good question, though.
Next one comes from Michael, who I believe is at Boulder Country Club. He said that his course is under renovation, which 2 holes totally different, and the remaining 16 holes set for renovation next year. When will my course be re-rated?
Michael, I'm actually getting in touch with you and Tara and everybody there at Boulder Country Club. You guys are up this year for your 8-year re-rate. So we will be in touch.
We got one saying, can we know when our course will be re-rated? Let me see.
Sure.
On here. Elmwood is the course that Vivian is at.
Oh, Elmwood was done in 2018, I believe. So they won't be rated until 2026.
Then, if you want to post an 18-hole score on a 9-hole course where the back or front 9 is not rated, would you have to play the rated 9 hole twice that day?
Yes, because remember, scores can only be posted when there's a rating and slope. If there's no rating and slope for a particular 9 holes, unfortunately, scores from that 9 holes would not be acceptable for for posting purposes. Good question. And Diana Valley Country Club was rated last year. Okay. All right, any other questions? We have come to the Q&A part of today's seminar. It's 12:30. I do have one last thing for you, or 2 last things for you, if you're all done with questions.
Hey, Aaron, when you showed the slide where you can go in and get those reports, was that on the CGA website or was that the back end of GIN?
No, that's the back end of GIN. We do not. So the CGA's website and the back end of GIN are 2 totally separate systems. So if you're looking for all that stuff, that would be the back end of GIN.
And where do we get those logins for the back end?
So actually, whomever's on your committee now would be able to give you or apply admin access to your email address. You just want to make sure to go see them. And then if they need help with that, feel free to have them give myself or Maddie a call, and we can help them with that process and get you all set up and good to go.
Thanks.
Cool. Yep, no problem.
One more question. Is there a schedule we can access regarding when courses are being rated?
There is not, actually. That is an internal schedule here. Although the course should have a sheet, a laminated sheet that'll show you when course ratings expire. And so just know that expiration year will be when, unless there's an entire modification to the golf course, will be when the course is re-rated. So for instance, 2019, it'll be 8 years from 2019. So 2027. So courses that we're rating this year were courses that were rated back in 2016. Question there, Lyle. Okay. Perfect. So now, let's see here. All right. So now I'm going to